Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Paul Thaler, the Chief Development Officer for the National LGBTQ Bar, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar put forth by the Bar's New Lawyers Division for new associates and for 3Ls. The Bar's mission is to bring together and support LGBTQ legal professionals to enhance your careers, to network together, and to help you do the important work that you do every day. Our new Lawyers Division Planning Committee members are delighted to be able to bring together this panel of experts to discuss tips for succeeding in law practice. Thank you to our speakers and our attendees for making time for the webinar and for the work that you do locally and nationally. Before we quickly start the program, most of the people that are attending today are already members of the Bar, but if you're not, I would encourage you to join the National LGBTQ Bar Association by going to our website, lgbtqbar.org, and just click on the membership icon to join us today to support our important work. I also will hope that you'll join us for our Lavender Law Conference and Career Fair, which is taking place July 28th through 30th in New York City. And it is free for law student member attendees. So I quickly want to introduce our accomplished and outstanding moderator, Omar Alanis. Omar is the managing partner of the Dallas office of Reed Smith, as well as a board member of the National LGBTQ Bar Association. Omar has a passion for mentoring law students and new lawyers and helping them to find success in the practice of law. And he's an incredibly talented lawyer, and we're grateful to him for serving as our moderator and a panelist today. So I'm passing it to you, Omar.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for being here. Paul's right; it is a passion of mine, partly because I made some mistakes, and so I have a lot to work from. But we're joined by two other esteemed panelists, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Paige Randall. Paige, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. My name is Paige Randall, and I am a 2018 Georgetown Law grad and currently an associate at Winston Strawn in the funds group, where I specialize in SBIC funds. So I work really closely with the government and different fund sponsors. And yeah, I've lateraled in my career, and I think as Omar said, I'm involved in the bar, I'm involved in mentoring because there's a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily know and you might mess up, and let our mistakes not be yours.
Right,
So,
exactly.
and apologies in advance, I broke my nose.
Okay. All right, Ryan.
Yeah, of course, Ryan Harmon. I am also class of 2018 out of GW. I am currently at a company called Income Payments, so we're a financial technology company based out of Atlanta. I cover all of our European, good chunk of APAC and compliance legal matters. Before that, I was in New York at Milbank, and then in Atlanta, I was at Hunton Andrews Kurth.
Very good. Well, in a lot of ways, Ryan's probably going to be our most important panelist because he's going to have both perspectives. He's going to have the law firm perspective and the client perspective. And so I'm going to ask you, Ryan, to draw upon both as we're going through the various topics. So the way that we set this up is sort of like almost like a top 10 tips. I don't know that we're going to get through everything. But we thought we'd start off first, which is kind of like just a level set, kind of just a broad a discussion of expectations when coming into a law firm environment, either as a summer associate or as a new lawyer. Kind of like, what's your role, and kind of like what should you be thinking about big picture to kind of set yourself up for success long term. And one of the things that to me, so I'm going to start. I'm going to ask you both to also chime in. But one of the things that I frequently try to impart on the associates is, up until this time, if you missed an assignment or you didn't study hard enough, or you studied, or you were outstanding in your studying, like ultimately that affected you, right? And your grade, right? So you can actually like make a decision like, I'm doing super well in this course, so I can slack off on this test and still end up okay, right? Because ultimately your decisions impact pretty much just you. When you're in the law firm world, it sort of shifts because what you do, the actions you take, the quality of your work, and all this other stuff, that affects a team, right? It affects the people that you work with. It affects clients. It has, so there's sort of a little bit of a shift in sort of mindset that you kind of have to make, of going from like just being accountable to yourself to being accountable to others, and thinking about your role as really more of a service provider, because we're certainly professionals, but we're also we are here to service clients. And that term actually is broader. We'll get into that in a second. But Ryan, any other thoughts on, big picture expectations?
Yeah, I think that expectations vary greatly. And so just like the question, how can I help on this? Or like, how can I be helpful? Let me know if there's something I can do. Like in all instances is never going to go bad across all teams. Like Omar, Paige, you'll probably agree that like no matter how junior you are, if you say, Omar, please let me know if I can be helpful. Thanks. It's like that goes a really long way. And it saves you time because I think there have been times where I'll get an email both in-house or at a law firm, and I'll think, oh, it'll be really helpful if I do a summary. And it's like, maybe the partner or like I could read it in 30 seconds and know the gist. So you don't need the summary, but forwarding it to someone else for their input would be helpful. So it's like the power of literally just asking. It's never annoying to people. Just ask. If they don't respond, they don't respond, but it can earn you points for sure.
Absolutely. Paige?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the hardest thing about being a junior associate is often seeing how your work fits into the bigger picture. So you'll get a discrete task and it may not seem important, or it's hard to motivate yourself to do. And I think, number one, always feel like you can ask how your part fits in, but number two, recognize that everything we're doing is a chain reaction. So a junior associate working for me impacts my work, and that impacts, if Omar is the partner on the matter, it impacts Omar's work. And then if, we're servicing Ryan as the client, it impacts Ryan's work. So just remembering that you're not working in a bubble anymore, and everything you do will set off a chain reaction. So kind of just, a basic like being respectful and considerate of other people's time.
Oh, okay, well, good. So actually, a lot of what Ryan and Paige said is a really good setup for a lot of what we're going to be talking throughout this presentation. The next topic broadly is professionalism. And we kind of went back and forth as to whether to even include this, but ultimately, the main reason why I was a proponent of keeping this in is because first impressions are everything in our professional world, right? So if someone has an idea about you because you've made a bad impression on with them, then that's probably going to influence the way they think about your work. And that's the same thing. I would say that's probably true internally and externally. And so, as an example, I had a summer associate not so long ago, where I was getting a couple of similar reports about this one particular associate that they'd walk lawyers would walk by a conference room and the summer associates would be in the room and he would have his feet up on the desk until somebody told him that that's probably you shouldn't do that. And then another time he was asked about whether he had seen a lawyer if she had shown up yet, and was like, yeah, some chick kind of walked through, like kind of very, that's not good language, right? Like that can be offensive. You don't want you to think, sorry, I my dog. I don't want you to think that you can't be your authentic self, but you can be authentic within a professional environment. So either Ryan or Paige, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also reading the room, right? So I have clients that are very formal. There are partners that want to be addressed dear, partner name. Um, and a lot of professionalism is just kind of matching tone. But I have a client that will say perf with an exclamation point to me, and responding like dear so and so would also be inappropriate. So it's really about using your best judgment and matching within the realm of professionalism, and kind of trying to create relationships within a professional environment, and kind of always keeping that in the back of your mind.
I think that's exactly right. And I am the client that says perf. I think maybe if you're like listing out all the skills you need to learn as a young associate, like matching tone and level of professionalism is like something you should think about as a core competency of being a lawyer, because like the unfortunate reality is if you're hyper professional, like you can't just err on the side of being hyper professional, because that also can be as ostracizing as being under professional, because it's like, I don't want to talk to that person. It's always weird. I'm not Mr. Harmon. So it's a skill. And I think maybe it's just me, but I think I have like a list in my head of times where I've been like, that was like kind of cringe. Like I overdid it or I underdid it. But it takes practice. It is a skill to think about in the same way that you think about your writing or your communication style. Like matching the tone is something you need to get good at.
Okay. One thing I did not do, and Paul, I'm going to ask you on the fly about this, is if anyone has questions, I assume that they can send them in the Q&A, and then I could read them. If that's not true, let me know. But for now, if you see a Q&A function, enter questions, and happy to answer them along the way. Our next topic is dress code. And I promise we're going to get to more substantive stuff. But we'll spend just a little bit of time on this. Paige, do you want to kick us off on the dress?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing here is knowing what your office expectations are, right? So I lateraled roughly a year ago, and Winston is a little bit more formal, but still not super formal. Like you could wear a blazer and like nice jeans. But the firm I came from was dress for your day, which I think is a good mantra kind of generally, like dress for your day within how formal your firm tends to be. But if you're going to sit in your office all day long and do doc review, that's a lot different than knowing you have a client meeting or knowing there's a firm social event. So just, I mean, again, a lot of this comes down to use your best judgment. I think err on the side of going a little bit more formal. Something I think you also may encounter is different environments and dressing differently. I live in Washington, D.C., and I definitely tend to dress a little bit more feminine when I'm visiting Midwestern clients. Like I don't fundamentally change how I'm dressed, but there are certain clients, certain industries, where I just know that I'll have an easier time if I dress more feminine. And that's still kind of true to my identity, so I'm fine with it. I'm certainly not advocating doing things that you're not comfortable with, but I think also recognizing that there are certain times where you might be code switching, but certainly don't do that in a manner that's uncomfortable for you or your identity. But everything in this job is about kind of being fluid and adapting and kind of knowing who you're going to be interacting with and what you're going to be facing. I think like the advice I got as a first year was keep a suit in your office just in case. And I don't think that that's bad advice even to this day, although most people probably aren't wearing suits for formal events. But I think be prepared, err on the side of formality, and be prepared to be a little adaptive.
Okay, Ryan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think when it comes to the code switching, that's really tricky because you don't want to have to get up every day and put on a costume that is not authentic. I think the thing I would say is that like all of your jobs, especially as a junior, especially at a law firm that has multiple divisions, like you are also receiving information and deciding what you want to do. And so like at Milbank, we did a rotational program and there were multiple groups, and the trust and estates group, which dealt with high net worth individuals, was incredibly formal because the thought was like, if so-and-so is going to show up and we're going to tell him or her what to do with $300 million, the least you can do is put on a suit. Conversely, I spent a lot of time in the project finance group, and there were nose rings and like you wore whatever you want. It was like a very fashionable group. And so I think obviously people should belong everywhere. If a reality of a certain practice area is that it's more formal than you like that's a data point to sometimes try something else. Obviously, no one should make you feel uncomfortable, But these sort of unwritten rules, if you pay attention to them, they're actually a really good guide for the type of environment you want to end up in.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Ryan and Paige said. It's interesting. Like me, in Texas, I'm a little bit of an older lawyer than you two, but it was a little more on
Very.
the. I'm not going to tell you my graduation year. Thankfully, Paul didn't mention it. But it was a little bit more. Not, I was never in a suit type of environment, but like for men, it was like kind of like long sleeve button downs and slacks. I can't even believe I said that word. But I actually got into a groove of like, getting outfits from a certain brand that I really liked, and I still feel great in those clothes. And so I actually kind of still wear those sometimes, even though for my office, since once I became managing partner, one of the first things I did was make sure that it was very clear that we were going to a business smart casual. So actually like something like this, like a golf shirt would a polo shirt would be totally fine for men. Jeans, that's fine. Trendy shoes, okay, no problem. And it is a little bit more like dress for your day or whatever. And I've told the office, if somebody important is coming, a judge or managing our global managing partner, I'll email everyone. You maybe dress it up that day, but I want people to feel comfortable. And so that's great for my office. I'm sure in other offices, maybe they don't have that, right? So you're kind of matching like what your, of course, asking other associates, more junior, senior associates is helpful. If I'm going to an event, I will usually Google image that event to see like what do people wear? Like so, I can think about, do I need to be like in a sports coat, or what kind of like what's the vibe? And so just kind of being mindful of that, I think is probably the best takeaway from this. Okay, spent quite a bit of time on that. Let's go to communication, even though we've kind of talked a little bit about that earlier on. And I do want to start back with you, Ryan, about communication. And by the way, we'll get later, we're going to get into writing. And so there's going to be some written communication there. But for right now, it's more like oral communication.
I mean, oral communication, maybe it's less relevant now. I mean, we do so much written, like so much is covered by email. The only interesting thing I have to say is like I'm on calls all day, and like I like spending a couple minutes chit-chatting with people and being a real person. Like it's so easy when you think about communication to talk about like how you're addressing someone, but the reality is like we're all human beings. A couple minutes of just appropriate catch up. It doesn't have to be lame about the weather. It can be dogs, it can be whatever. But talking to people about things other than work is really valuable, and keeping a note of what people care about. So it's like Omar talk about his dog. Like those little things help you become a real person to the people that you work with. And therefore you will get better work and people will invest more time in you.
Paige?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think obviously Ryan is speaking from both the law firm and the client perspective. And as a junior, I think keeping in mind that your clients are your coworkers,
Yeah.
is really important. So building relationships there, is going to help get more work. And it's also going to make you more comfortable, right? Like asking questions is going to result in your best work product. And if you have some sort of interpersonal relationship with your colleagues, most likely you are going to feel more comfortable asking them questions.
Totally.
So it's about creating an environment that makes you feel like you can be yourself, ask the questions you need to ask, and just be an open communicator. I personally would rather have someone over communicate than under communicate. So if you have competing deadlines, tell me that so I can plan. If you have a question that's going to impact half of the work product, ask me in advance so I'm not getting a draft that's half done.
And then too, someone can say, I imagine, like you do a week or 2 weeks of that approach, whatever you think is most natural. And then it's like, hey, Paige, by the way, is this cool? Is this a good amount? Do you want me to check in more or less? Like you can get
Yeah.
feedback on how much you're talking and nobody cares. And if they, I mean, like people might ignore it, but at least you're like in real time figuring out what the appropriate level is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that actually,
you're gonna hit your stride.
Yeah, that reminds me of a question a summer associate asked once, or maybe it was a young associate, but it was about, how frequently should I be emailing or copying you on emails, right? Like I think they were thinking by default, I don't want to flood their inbox, he's really busy, like, I'm sure he's got a lot going on. But actually that I would rather be copied on stuff because number one, I do have lots of things going on, but like there's, kind of little bookmarks in my head about, if things are getting done on particular cases. And if I'm not seeing anything and 6 hours later, I'm like, whoa, nothing's happened in this deal. When I told him to, if I'm copied on something, it at least lets me know something's, has happened. And I have my own filtering system, right? Like I have my own filing system. You don't need to worry about that. Like just, but I'm sure maybe other partners are probably more on the side of, yeah, don't bother me with this stuff. You run with it, right? So everyone has their own different styles. The other thing that I know annoys me, and I know it annoys me because I know it annoys some clients, right? And I would expect, one thing I hear about in-house counsel's pet peeves is, if an email is coming to you, just respond, even if you can't do like a fulsome response. It was just like a will do, or like, even if it's like, yeah, like today I've got, I'm traveling today, but I'll look at it first thing in the morning. The worst thing I think you can do is just not respond and let the day go by, and the next, and it's like, hey, did you see this? Like that, like that's where I think you can kind of run
I've
into
sent things to
trouble.
other people. Like if I haven't gotten a response, like a lot of times I have multiple firms and it's like I have a preferred one. And then if I don't hear back in a certain amount of time, I'll just forward it to somebody else. Sometimes they'll email to the lawyer and say, hey, can you please just do this? They're not responding. And then say, forget about it. And it's like, not to be a jerk, but on the client side, like a lot of times I like Omar, but if Omar's tied up, like it's no hard feelings. I can find someone else to do it. And like, I'll come right back to Omar next time. Like it's not always super personal. It's just knowing what's going on. And then the other thing is just like the value of I'm sorry. Like we work a lot of hours and things get tense. And a lot of times you'll say something and get off the call and be like, man, I was a real jerk about that. And just the value of being like, hey, sorry, tired, got a little short. I'm just trying to figure this out. Like, sorry, like my bad. Then it puts it behind you and you just keep moving and creating more positive data points. But to like put your foot down or not acknowledge when something came out wrong, I think is a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking of another story where, I mean, I've had this actually. I have one associate that for some reason he won't respond, and and then I'll be like, what's going on? And then be like, oh, well, I was preparing this beautiful manifesto, and he said, and it's actually like he was right, like it's perfect work product. But I'm like, but still, like that doesn't really solve the issue of the responsiveness, because there's going to be other times where like I have a client like Ryan and he's going to move on to something else, and then that's not good for anybody, right? So you should really kind of think about the just small response, even if it's like don't you have to wait to do the full research
And that
assignment before.
associate has created an issue for you. Like if it
Yeah.
was a simple question and now you have 3 hours of time that you have to either like bill or write off, like maybe it's great work product, but like in terms of actually what's going to make depend on your day or determine your day, now you have a headache because you have
Hmm.
$1,500 worth of fees that you have to figure out what to do with.
Yes. Actually, Ryan, I'm going to give you a lot of airtime because the next topic, I think you are probably going to be a really good perspective on this one, and that's deadlines. So let's talk about the importance of deadlines, because I think sometimes in the associate world, we're thinking about deadlines internally between the associate and the partner, but of course it's much broader than that. So Ryan.
Yeah, sure. I think again, it's like the communication. I have however many requests, and 85% of them are actually not particularly time sensitive. And so it's like, check in, what's the deadline? Okay, cool, we can meet it. But sometimes it's like horror stories. Like a couple weeks ago, I was going to London and I had promised my commercial SVP, who is like my ultimate client, that I would have something before I got on the plane. Or actually, I think I said I would send it over the weekend and my plan was to review it on the plane. And then my outside counsel, right before my flight, said, hey, sorry, we're running. I checked in and they said, sorry, we're running late. We'll have it to you tomorrow. And it was like, guys, that actually like doesn't work. Like, I need to review this on the plane. I don't know if there's going to be Wi-Fi. I have to download it. And I think, like, by and large, like, outside counsels want to be constructive. Like, it is a real partnership, but like, those are the kind of things where if I've told my SVP and my GC that whoever, pick a firm, is working on something, and then I have to go back to them and say, sorry, haven't gotten it from outside counsel, there's going to be another delay for you. It's two things. Like, it makes me look bad, which I then hate. And also, like, I can't insulate the firm. Like, I have to have my fees approved. And if the firm misses a deadline, it makes it a lot harder for me to send work in the future because it's like a public mistake. And so deadlines, I think, are really one of the only things that can create like problems that Omar and I, like, if we're working together, or Paige and I, like, that we just can't surmount. Like, you've gotten sideways with my GC. I'm not allowed to send more work to you. Like, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were saying that, it's just reminding me, like, at my last law firm, I remember, hearing stories of, when associates would chatter about so and so partners, like, yeah, they always make up these fake deadlines. Our brief is due, could be due, in 2 weeks. They'll make the deadline like 2 weeks earlier, maybe even longer, and it's so unreasonable. And then of course, now that I'm on that side, I'm like, well, 2 weeks, that's actually a pretty short time, because if you think like in a just a typical structure, it's associate giving a draft to the partner. There's probably going to be some revisions, fixing stuff, then it comes back. Then I, if Ryan's my client, I'm going to then send the draft to Ryan. Ryan may have some input and all that. We're going to go back and forth, but Ryan ultimately has his client internally, and maybe his client is, busy with other stuff. So so there's a chain, right? And then it kind of goes back down the chain by,
Go ahead, sorry.
well, just quickly, like, if the associate is compressing that time because missing deadline, then it's affecting Ryan, and we don't want to affect Ryan. We don't want Ryan to fire us.
I think the other unfortunate reality on this one is really your deadline is as soon as you can. Like, if I have something that I know is due in 2 weeks, especially if you're an associate, like, fine, you have 2 weeks, but if something wild comes in tomorrow that you're not planning for, that then eats 70 hours over, 6 days, you don't have the time to do it. And so, like, my guidance when I first started, the guidance I got was always like, do it as soon as you have time. And then if you have the time, if the deadline's later and you can sit on it and review it, great. But you don't want to be in a spot where you all of a sudden are working through the night to get done with something, because the work product will also suffer.
Right.
Paige, I feel like I've monopolized this
Yeah,
one.
Paige, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be late nights. I think it's just important to keep in mind that in the same way that you've probably carved up your day or your week, or like I literally keep a to-do list with what day I'm gonna get everything done.
Totally.
But like, if that's 10 hours of your day back to back to back, that's just simply not realistic, right? Like, I could get 15 emails in 5 minutes, like for a new project, or a client could have an emergency and stuff kind of constantly has to shift. So I think just when you're creating your work plan and like basing your deadlines, you have to, number one, keep some like downtime essentially for the stuff that's inevitably going to come in. And also just remember that in the same way that you're carving out certain blocks of time for certain things, everyone else in the chain is doing the same thing. So if you're a day late, but hey, I got it done by Friday at 5, well, that means your senior associate is reviewing it on a
Yeah.
Friday night. And then are they really going to dump it on the client on a Friday night or a Saturday morning? Like, it just, you know, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. So just bearing that in mind, I think is critical.
Well, I want to stick with you, Paige, on this next topic, because it's kind of like it's a really good transition into the concept of clients. And as a junior associate kind of coming in day one, thinking that you may not have a client for, way down the road. Is that the right mentality to have?
No, I mean, I think day one, you have clients, and it's
Mhm.
maybe not going to be external clients, but I started my career at a very large international law firm, um, which right now shall not be named. And like we had on a deal, might have like a first year, a second year, a third year, like tons of people. So your client is everyone above you on that, right? Like everyone you're getting work product to is your client. And good work begets more work. So
Yeah.
you want to impress not necessarily because your work is flawless, because it's the beginning of your career, but because you are responsive and you meet your deadlines and it's clear that you try. All of those little things are going to show each client in the chain that you care and that you're a good person to work with. And progressively, every person in the chain's job is going to be just a little bit easier because of you. And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think from the client perspective, what you really want from a lawyer is to have your job be easier and be able to trust what someone's doing, right? Like I don't want to give a junior associate work that I know I'm gonna have to like basically do myself again. Um, Nor is a client gonna want to pay for subpar work that they have to proofread or whatever it is. So, just keeping in mind even if you're not talking to the client on day one, you still are talking to clients on day one.
Do you two work primarily with in-house counsels or with business people? Paige, are you business people?
Yeah, most of the funds are small enough that it's mainly business people, typically like IR people.
I guess it's like two things. So when I'm working with a counsel directly, they are kind of like my right-hand person for a particular matter. And so the value is I can tell my GC, don't worry about this employment issue in the UK. It is handled because I trust so and so. That's like, I have a client and that is my GC, and I can say, we are good here. You don't worry about this. When I have a business team that's working with a lawyer, they're trying to get the deal done or whatever it is and satisfy their commercial boss. But your job is twofold. Like you are a client of like the institution is the one you care about. So I want to trust that you're going to flag something that is problematic. And also you want to make the business person look good. So like for Paige, it's like, yeah, we're closing this right on time. Here's the deal. Everything is done. And that junior person then uses that deal to ask for a raise at the end of the year. So like your work can help get people more money or get them hired if it turns out we let something slip through that then lost us a bunch of money.
Yeah, that reminds me of my very first client ever was Shell, and that's because Travis Torrance, who is a board member here, he took over the bankruptcy docket in a brief period of time where the bankruptcy lawyer was on maternity leave. And it was like maybe a week or two before she came back on. So he was like, I want you to work on this. It's really good. So awesome. She comes back. She did not like, she already was like, I already have my own bankruptcy people. I don't know who you are. And, so it was kind of a rough relationship the first couple months. And she was making me do a lot of stuff that, I was like, okay, she don't like me, right? Well, within 2 months, something happened, and I don't remember exactly the details, but I helped her make her look good for her boss. Something was going on, and I'm like, I gave her the support. She looked good in front of her boss, and from that day forward, it was just like Ryan said. It was like, you're my best buddy. I can trust you for anything. And then from that point on, I became her bankruptcy person for all matters going forward. So it really is like the mentality of like making if when you are having that relationship of the in-house counsel, it is it is helping them look good for their boss is kind of one of the key important parts of that relationship.
But I guess one of the unfortunate realities is that you also have to acknowledge that everyone's your client, but all clients are not created equal. Like, unfortunately, if I spend $500,000 a year with a firm and someone else spends 3 million, like Omar's going to have to figure out how to tell me, sorry, dude, we're going to do everything we possibly can, but we have to figure this out. And like, I mean, Omar probably won't, maybe he won't tell me he would do that, but like, it's the same in-house. Like, certain people, I have to make them happy. And if that means not doing something for someone else, like, everyone needs to communicate. But I think sometimes you can get in real trouble if you don't keep in mind the context in which all of these clients interact with each other. I don't know, Omar, someone tell me if you disagree or put that in nice
No,
terms.
no, I totally agree. I mean, but it's almost like all these things that we're talking about, clients and communication, like all that stuff, it all kind of just like kind of goes hand in hand. Like we may seem like we're talking about them in separate ways, but they're all kind of like kind of flow together. And I really hope that with this conversation that we're having, it's at least exposing you to certain things that I know that I didn't think about when I was starting off as a summer associate and as a young lawyer, because at the time, I was used to just being a good student and knowing how to be a good student. But being successful in the law firm world, there is a little bit more nuance.
Mhm.
And as long as you're kind of with the open mindset of there's probably things that I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And being open to, these types of various topics we're talking about, I think is going to help you lead to success. We're doing really good on time, and we only have a few more topics, but I do want to get into another important one, which we have talked a little bit about before, but is writing. Um, and I'll just kick it off by saying, and Ryan, this is something you mentioned, I think a little bit earlier, is the way you write, if I'm writing an email, for example, to somebody, that email is going to look very different depending on who that somebody is, right? Like, first you got to think about like who is your audience, right? So when I'm asking an associate, I know I have a pretty good substantive knowledge of an area of my bankruptcy practice, but there's just a little thing that I just really don't. I don't know if case has talked about this one little issue. If I got back an email from my associate that told me what the bankruptcy code is, and here's a perfect citation for the statute, and here's a 7 okay, like I don't need all that. Like, we're busy, right? So like just get to the point. Like, I just need that little piece that I mentioned about, like, you don't need to do perfect citations, you don't need to like do the blue book style, like it's just for my purposes. But if it's something that is for a client that is not familiar with the concepts, then you want to just be a little bit more explanatory, but in a user-friendly way. And like, I think a this is a trick. This is something that is going to be is you're going to develop your entire career, is like getting that perspective of how do I put myself in their position, and if I'm them reading this, is this making sense? Like, am I able to absorb that? And sometimes you don't know because you don't and that's why sometimes I start off asking like a client like Ryan, like, are you familiar with bankruptcy law? Like, if have you done this before? Like, could I don't want to come across as like
Sorry,
babying them,
condescending.
like condescending, right? Like, but there's some clients that are like, I have no clue. Please talk to me like I'm a second grader. And there's other clients like, dude, like I'm not an idiot, So it is finding that, and you probably will get it wrong sometimes, and that's okay. Like, you just keep going. But just in general, being mindful of like who's your audience, what does that work product need to look like, and how am I making my reader's life easier or communicating in an effective way that's digestible. It's a mouthful. Ryan, so any more on that?
I think that if someone will do it for you, getting someone to review your emails is so helpful. Like, I learned so much by like, there was a period where it's like every email I sent to a client, if it was substantive, I would send it to my senior associate and they would just tweak it. And sometimes it was like, hey, I added bullets. This is going to help them respond.
Mhm.
So it's tricky because some lawyers find that to be very, very annoying and don't want to read the emails. But if you have someone in your circle that knows what the matter is and will review the email and mark it up, that is invaluable.
I think a lot of senior associates will do that. And I mean, some are just like control freaks and want to do it anyways. But I think taking the time to learn from the changes they make, there were certainly sometimes where it's just writing style and someone wants to rewrite your email
Like,
because
whatever.
they want to rewrite your email. But a lot of times you will get that feedback that's like, a certain part of my practice is reviewing documents and sending comments to investors. So the formatting is something I learned, and
Yeah.
I still teach my associates now how to do it the way that I learned because I like referencing it by PDF pages, not document pages, and like little things that make it friendlier to the person that's receiving it. But all of that is stuff I learned, way back when. How to name documents, the littlest
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
that just will get burned into your brain, but take the time to burn it into your brain. Even now, I keep a document on my desktop called like FAQs, and it's
Oh.
little questions that I have, little things that come up in writing, client works, like whatever it is, and it all goes in there. And then I can reference it when it comes back up. If there's a new thing, I add to it. Um, but just like you're constantly learning. And the last thing I will say on writing specifically from a corporate perspective is leverage precedent. So most of the time you are not drafting something from scratch. Um, ask ask questions, ask where to go, leverage what you're getting from other documents. I'm sure that's also true in litigation to an extent. Um, but I think, when I started law school, I had this idea that you'd be like drafting contracts by hand and like, no.
Do you ever hear
Like,
that thing that's like in law school, copying someone's work is plagiarism? In work, not copying someone's work is malpractice? Like,
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
not starting from the
Yeah.
precedent is called, there's
Yeah.
a word for that, it's malpractice.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Totally. Totally. I totally agree with that. I mean, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And for me, sometimes it's actually just getting my mind kind of in the right place. Like if I'm seeing, sometimes I'll look at different precedents, right? Like if I'm doing a purchase agreement, like I'll look at different ones or a motion in the bankruptcy court. I'll look at least five because whatever is filed is negotiated, right? So, if I'm looking for, maybe I'm thinking about a buyer-friendly document versus a seller-friendly document, I've got to look at a few because, there was some leverages were probably influence the final product. And so, you want to look for more than just one.
But that's
Well,
one where you know enough to decide which precedent you look at. Like, I think I've made catastrophic mistakes where it's like, oh, well, I use this precedent. And my partner will say, like, well, that's idiotic. That's the worst deal I've done in 30 years. And now you just gave away the very
Yes.
worst covenant imaginable because you
Right.
used it as the starting point. So it's
Yes.
best
but
to
I
ask
think
on
that's
the
also a
credit.
good point is especially if you're starting at like in a big group at a larger firm and you're looking for precedent, like even now, if I'm looking at side letters, I will look at side letters for the partner and the associate that I'm working with, even if it's a totally different client, because I know that it's provisions that they've either drafted or reviewed and can get comfortable with, even if it's not for this particular client, but it's not something that they're going to be like, where the hell did you get this? Like,
And probably you look at the first version of it or the one that went out
yep,
initially, not the
exactly.
Mhm.
like V1 in whatever the document management system is.
Mhm.
Oh, and the final thing I'll say, because it was never bluntly said to me, and in hindsight, I wish it was. Every time you prepare a work product, not well, 99% of the time, you should be sending a red line, showing the changes
Yeah.
to your work. That helps the senior associate or the partner review it. You should never send a red line without looking at it first.
Mhm.
You wouldn't believe the number of times like a W gets capitalized in the word with or like random little things. And doing a once over pass of your work for at least the not even sloppy errors, but the more obvious errors that aren't substantive changes makes a good draft look like a better draft, because at least it's like clean, defined terms are synced, like it shows that you really spent time on it, and that goes a long way. So always, always, always check your work, and a red line is the best way to check your work.
I totally agree. And actually another, and this is maybe a related tip, is, sometimes as, I like to do my changes, and track changes so that the associates can sometimes see what I'm doing. Sometimes I don't have time, if we're pressed, then I'll just make changes myself and then get it off. And so if I'm the associate, what I'm hoping the associates do, and sometimes I tell them to do this, and sometimes I forget to tell them, like, just redline the last two versions, or let's see what did the partner change. Like, they didn't have time to tell me, but I just want to see how it ended up and what do I need to fix, right? Because sometimes even the most mentory of us, move on to other things, or sometimes forget to take those times to mentor. We're running up on 10 minutes till, and so I just wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A. And we just have a couple more items to discuss. One thing that it seems so minor, but I think it's kind of part of, sort of an overall like success of person is what I would call good firm or corporate hygiene. The little things like, the billing the time, dealing your time on time, all that stuff. And so I'll open this up for either Paige or Ryan to comment on just kind of like nailing the small little details.
Paige, do you want to go? Or I can.
Yeah. Why don't you start? And
Yeah. I mean, I think that like the advice I always got was like never be on a list. Like, you don't want to be on the list of people that didn't submit their time. You don't want to be on the list of the people that didn't show up 3 days a week, because then Omar has to talk to you. And it's like a reasonable person probably would look at these individually and say like, look, I'm doing a great job. Nobody cares if I'm in 2 or 4 days a week. But the reality is like your name is then out there for something that is causing somebody stress. And so it's hard because you're working all the time or you're working a lot. And it's like you're just trying to find some sort of wiggle room to go home. But those little things, like having a reputation for not being an administrative headache for people, help you out a lot.
Totally agree. We have different, every firm has different policies, that of course, I do get a report at the month end of any of the timekeepers that violated the policy. And of course, it's not a big deal. Like Ryan said, like, we're busy, like sometimes things happen, but it's like the repeat offenders. I'm like, is there anything going on with you? Like, maybe if it's also part of the overall narrative about
Yeah.
you being like detail oriented and like being thoughtful and careful and all that other stuff. So it's just kind of like part and parcel of all of that. Like, even like keeping your office clean, which I have a really bad problem of leaving waters and coffees and drinks on my, and because I know it sounds disgusting, but I try to do better about that. But keeping like if your office is a disaster, like it kind of maybe speaks a little bit about you, and like, are you careful with your work, kind of thing. Like, so just having like a good little like hygiene about that, I think is just something to keep in mind.
And Omar too, like tell me if this is wrong, like you're at a law firm because you're ambitious and want to do a good job. And once, as you become more senior, my understanding is that it's like one element of that is managing a team. And if you always have a team, your bankruptcy team is always not putting in their hours, like your practice group leader, or if the Houston office or the Dallas office isn't doing this thing, like that makes people hesitant to make you progress, even though it's administrative. Like, it's a bad look on
Yeah.
you, and then you can't get more responsibility and more role.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I just had a situation where, we were talking about somebody's promotion and I was able to say they do
Yeah.
everything great, right? Like they do their time on, they're comply with this policy, like they're like it's just is that going to make a huge difference? I don't know, but it's part of the overall narrative about who you are. Okay. I think we just got a couple more. Using resources I think is so important. I think regardless of what organization you're in, there's probably some resources particularly in the law firm. And I hear kind of constant complaints, probably from the more on the partner side, but even some of the associates about, going to a training, like, oh, I've got this new AI tool, like, oh, I gotta have to go to this training. I'm like, the AI tool is probably gonna make your life more efficient. Like if you just spend a little bit of time to understand it, or like, like knowing just different ways that research tools, like, we have like a library services at my firm, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that they did this thing that I usually spend time doing, like an asset search or something like that. Knowing how to leverage resources, can oftentimes help the client lower costs and all that. And so just taking time to like go to trainings or familiarizing yourself with, what's available to you, I think is really important. Paige, do you have anything on that?
I mean, I think it's like with everything that we've been saying, you want to learn and you want to kind of be a sponge, and staff, IT department, people in like learning development, all of that are there for your benefit. Learn from them, ask them questions, and uh, I think like having a sounding board, like a mentor, is a really good way to kind of test that out. If there are things that you're unsure of, or is this worth it? I know like we at Winston, we have a 6th year associate training program that I went to last year. So I work with a couple 5th year associates who asked me like, hey, I'm super busy. Is it worth going like this year? And that we were able to like compare experiences, and they ended up going. But like that's why building relationships and using resources, even if they're not like formal resources, is really good.
You actually said something, Paige, that made me realize a topic that I accidentally skipped, which is interactions with staff. So I think is I know for in my office, that is important to me. At my prior firm when I left, and I sent an email to the entire office, like that I was moving on. I got a couple emails from some staff members that were kind of quite concerning. I mean, I won't go into too much detail, but it was kind of along the lines of like, you always made us, you warmed my day, or you were one of the only lawyers that actually looked me in the eye, said good morning, those kind of things. Like those kind of things mattered, and I think now that I'm in I mean that maybe is what helped me to get into a leadership role, is when the organization trusts that you are a decent human being in addition to everything that we do. I just think it sets the right tone, right? I mean, to what Paige just said earlier, I mean, I don't do it for this reason, but I'm confident that if I need a favor from a staff member, they're going to go out of their way to help me. And it is entirely in their prerogative maybe to say like, sorry, I've got other plan, or something, I'm busy, or I'm doing something else. But they're gonna definitely try to make my life easier, because I've done all I could to make their life easier. Ryan, do you have anything on
Do you
that?
monetarily bribe them?
Huh?
Do you bribe them monetarily?
Do I bribe them monetarily? No,
I'm
maybe I should come
curious.
with
I
a
mean, like, I think that's like a practical tip is like just contribute to whatever the pools are for the holiday gifts, for the
oh,
appreciation
right. Yeah,
day.
we do that.
It's
Yeah,
like,
we do that. Yeah.
fine, they don't do any work for you, and it's unclear what like it's a team. Sometimes there'll be someone that's like not helpful at all, and you've never talked to her or him, and he's cranky, but it's like, whatever, just eat the $50, contribute to the holiday thing, because like you do really never know when you're going to want to work with them. Take all the friendly chat as a given, but the money goes a long way. So just participate
Yeah,
in schools.
they do. Yeah, we did one. The one last year was able to give everyone two crisp $100 bills, and they just looking
Yeah.
at their faces, opening those envelopes was just so heartwarming. Yeah, things like that just go such a long way.
And I don't know how, but they know who contributes. So it's like you don't want to be on the bad list or get a reputation for not contributing.
Um, okay, we only have a couple minutes left, and I'm actually right kind of towards the end um just and we kind of maybe already covered this of taking an opportunity to learn. Um, and I'm gonna skip that because we've talked a lot about that. I actually would like to just get Paige and Ryan maybe just some parting thoughts or maybe some last words of wisdom, because we really truly have covered just about everything. So I'm if we're able to do that. So I'll start with you, Paige, if you maybe takeaway or anything, parting words for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think show up as yourself, kind of find your groove, find what works for you, and find the people that you feel like you can learn from and the resources that are helpful. It might not come right away, and some of that is out of your control, but I think the things that are within your control are being communicative and reviewing your work and like kind of doing the basics and being respectful, like all of that. And that will help position you to find those people that will help, boost you up in your career and um, be great resources. But I don't think you need to go in day one, like, I need to find someone, like, I need to do all this. Like, just go in with like a steady head on your shoulders and like knowing what you need to get done and like kind of using your common sense and take your time, no matter how much of a rush things seem to be within the bounds of the deadline. Take your time and do good work because at the end of the day, that's the impression that you're going to be evaluated on.
Right?
And on that, I mean, if you're taking your time and you're doing good work, especially at a firm, like every door is open to you. Like Paige and Omar want every associate to succeed. And if you take in the data points of those groups and you don't like elements of it, like that, you are empowered to think about that and then decide you want to do something else or decide you want to try something else. And so I think a trap is you go somewhere and you want to just succeed at all costs, and it ends up just you're always faking it. So it's like, do good work, obviously, that's why they pay you, but then absorb the data points and use that to find the thing that you're going to get a lot of joy out of and actually want to be good at, which you can then leverage for like a happier life and also just monetarily something that you can, a career that you can really rely on.
Well, I wish I would have had these words of wisdom back when I was a summer associate age or young lawyer age. This has been great. Thank you both for being on. Thank you for the LGBT bar for allowing us to do this. If you have any questions or follow-ups, I will speak for myself and probably for Paige and Ryan too. You can look us up on a directory
Absolutely.
and love to continue any conversation.
Are there emails somewhere? Anywhere?
No, but we can follow up with the attendees today and provide your
Perfect.
emails.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
please do.
I'm happy to talk to anybody, all of us probably collectively too. Like we have a pretty good network of people. So if you like want to know about something or know about a
Yeah.
practice area, one of us can figure out how to find you someone that can talk about that.
Absolutely.
It's a big help. Well, thank you all for your time today. And yeah, talk again soon.
Bye.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.